Ladies and gentlemen, today the world watches Rome, a city where ancient stones whisper tales of power, faith, and transformation. Once again, history unfolds within its walls as a new spiritual chapter begins, the inauguration of Pope Leo Roman XIV. But why does this moment matter? It is not merely a religious ritual. It is the ascension of a spiritual leader to a role that transcends borders. The inauguration of a pope is a signal to more than one. 3 billion Catholics worldwide, a reaffirmation of faith, purpose, and direction for the global church. This ceremony, deeply rooted in sacred tradition, is both spiritual and diplomatic. Leaders from across the globe journey here, not only to witness, but to recognize the presence speaks to something bigger than politics. It acknowledges moral authority, values, the role of the church. Imagine the Vatican. Its bells, its blessings, its symbolism carries meaning. Every garment worn, every prayer spoken, and every gesture made has been shaped by centuries of history. It is not only about honoring the past, but about sending a clear message for the future. Rome, the beating heart of Catholicism, transforms during these events into a stage of unity and dialogue. It becomes a reminder that in a world often divided by ideology and policy, there still exists a space where moral conviction can gather people of vastly different backgrounds. This is also a media moment. News outlets around the world share these visuals of sacred rites, towering basilicas, and the warm embrace of tradition with millions, and in doing so, they translate the depth of this occasion into a global conversation. So what we are witnessing today is more than a ceremony. It is a convergence of faith, diplomacy, and cultural reflection. It's a reminder that while times change, the role of moral and spiritual leadership remains vital. This inauguration does not belong to one man or one church. It is part of humanity's ongoing search for meaning, truth, and unity. The inauguration of a pope is one of the most symbolic and meaningful ceremonies in the world, carrying not only spiritual weight but also deep historical significance. It is not just the introduction of a new religious leader. It is the continuation of a sacred tradition that has endured for nearly 2,000 years. When a new pope is inaugurated, the event represents far more than a mere change in leadership. It signals a reaffirmation of the continuity, stability, and enduring relevance of the Catholic Church. The origins of papal inaugurations can be traced back to the early centuries of Christianity. In the beginning, the process was informal, and the Bishop of Rome, who later came to be known as the Pope, was elected by the clergy and laity of the city. Over time, as the Church's influence grew, so did the formality and complexity of the rituals surrounding the installation of a new pope. By the Middle Ages, the election of a pope by the College of Cardinals became the norm, and with it came a host of ceremonial practices designed to legitimize and celebrate the new pontiff's authority. Throughout history, the papal inauguration has served several purposes. First, it establishes the pope's ecclesiastical authority in the eyes of the faithful. This is not simply a matter of taking office. It is a sacred moment in which the new leader is recognized as the spiritual successor to St. Peter, who, according to Christian tradition, was appointed by Jesus Christ himself to lead the Church. The Pope is not a political figure, although his influence touches politics. He is a shepherd, a servant, leader tasked with guiding the global Catholic community in faith, doctrine, and moral integrity. Second, the inauguration serves as a visible expression of unity within the Church. It is attended by cardinals, bishops, clergy, and laity from all over the world, representing the universal nature of the Catholic Church. Regardless of cultural, linguistic, or national differences, the ceremony draws people together under a shared spiritual tradition. The rites, symbols, and language used in the inauguration are steeped in history and designed to transcend the divisions of time and geography. A key element of the inauguration is the Mass, which takes place in St. Peter's Basilica or in St. Peter's Square, depending on the number of attendees. During this Mass, the new Pope receives the Pallium, a woolen band worn around the neck, as a sign of his authority and role as the shepherd of the Church. He also receives the ring of the Fisherman, a symbol of the Apostolic succession from St. Peter, who was a fisherman by trade. These gestures, rich in tradition, connect the new Pope to centuries of predecessors and to the foundational principles of Christianity. Over the centuries, these ceremonies have adapted to reflect changing times. For instance, before the Second Vatican Council in the 1960s, the Pope was traditionally crowned with the papal tiara, a bejeweled triple crown symbolizing his temporal and spiritual power. However, that tradition was discontinued in the spirit of humility and modernization. The focus today is less on regal display and more on service and spiritual leadership. Even so, the historical continuity remains evident in every aspect of the ceremony, from the Latin prayers to the garments worn by the Pope and the clergy. Papal inaugurations are also a reflection of the Church's place in the broader world. Historically, these events have drawn monarchs, presidents, prime ministers, and representatives from other religions, signifying the Pope's global significance not only as a religious leader, but also as a moral voice on international issues. The inauguration becomes a moment of diplomacy and interfaith solidarity, as well as a religious milestone. The attention given to these inaugurations by the media and the public further emphasizes their importance. Millions watch from around the world, tuning in to witness a moment that reaffirms spiritual leadership and moral responsibility in a rapidly changing world. The rituals speak to something that remains constant in the human condition, a yearning for meaning, for continuity, and for leadership grounded in values rather than power. In conclusion, the historical significance of papal inaugurations lies in their ability to bridge the past and the present. They serve not only as ceremonies of transition, but also as living traditions that connect today's believers with centuries of faith. In every chant, in every blessing, and in every symbolic act, we see echoes of the early Church and a vision for the future, one grounded in unity, service, and enduring spiritual purpose. Papal inaugurations are some of the most meaningful ceremonies in the world, not just for Catholics, but for anyone interested in history, tradition, and global leadership. When a new pope is inaugurated, it's much more than just a formal event. It's the continuation of a 2000-year-old tradition, a symbol of spiritual leadership, and a powerful reminder of how history still shapes our world today. To understand why papal inaugurations are so important, we have to look back to the beginnings of the Catholic Church. Early on, the Bishop of Rome, who eventually became known as the Pope, was chosen by local church leaders and community members. Over time, as Christianity spread and became more organized, the process of selecting and installing a pope became more formal. Today, popes are elected by a group called the College of Cardinals, and their inauguration is a highly symbolic public event that's watched around the world. So, why does this matter? First, it's about spiritual authority. Catholics believe that the Pope is the successor of St. Peter, one of Jesus' closest followers. According to tradition, Jesus chose Peter to lead the early Christian community. Because of that, every pope since is seen as continuing Peter's mission. The inauguration is the moment when the new pope officially steps into that role. It's not just about power or leadership. It's about taking on a deep responsibility to guide the Church's teachings and provide moral direction to over 1 billion Catholics worldwide. Second, papal inaugurations bring people together. These ceremonies include clergy, religious leaders, government officials, and everyday people from every continent. No matter where they're from or what language they speak, they all come to celebrate the same thing. It's a powerful display of unity and shared belief, especially in a time when the world often feels divided. The rituals, prayers, and symbols used during the inauguration have stayed the same for hundreds of years. That sense of tradition helps people feel connected, not only to each other but also to their history and faith. The main event of the inauguration is usually a special Mass held in St. Peter's Square in Vatican City. During the ceremony, the new Pope receives two important symbols. The first is the Pallium, a white wool band placed around the Pope's shoulders to show his role as a shepherd or leader of the global Church. The second is the ring of the Fisherman, a reference to St. Peter, who was a fisherman before becoming a disciple. This ring is unique to each pope and is a sign of his authority. These symbols might seem small, but they carry big meaning. They link the new pope to centuries of tradition and responsibility. Interestingly, some parts of the ceremony have changed over time. In the past, the pope used to be crowned with a large triple crown called the papal tiara. It represented his power not just in the Church, but also in politics. However, starting in the 1960s, that tradition was stopped to reflect a more humble, service-focused image of the papacy. Today's ceremonies are more about spiritual leadership than showing off power, but they still honor the rich traditions of the past. Papal inaugurations also show how the Church connects with the rest of the world. These events are often attended by presidents, prime ministers, kings, queens, and representatives of other religions. It shows that the Pope isn't just a religious figure, he's a global voice for peace, justice, and moral values. Even if people aren't Catholic, many still recognize the Pope as someone who tries to bring people together and speak out on important issues. And let's not forget the role of media. In the age of technology, millions of people around the world watch papal inaugurations live on TV or online. It turns a religious ceremony into a global moment. People see the beauty of the tradition, the power of the message, and the importance of faith in our world today. In the end, papal inaugurations are not just about religion. They're about history, culture, and human connection. They remind us that even in a fast-changing world, some traditions still hold deep meaning. They help people feel part of something bigger than themselves. And most importantly, they show how leadership rooted in service, humility, and hope can still inspire millions. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into one of the most fascinating and historic ceremonies in the world, the inauguration of a pope. You've probably seen clips on the news of thousands gathered in St. Peter's Square, all eyes on one man in white robes. But what's really going on behind all the pageantry? Why does this event still matter in 2025? Let's break it down. A papal inauguration isn't just a fancy tradition. It's a global spiritual event with roots going back nearly 2,000 years. When a new pope is elected, what happens next is not just a leadership handover. It's a continuation of one of the oldest lines of succession in human history, starting with St. Peter, who Christians believe was appointed by Jesus himself. So when a new pope takes office, the ceremony isn't just to celebrate the individual. It's to recognize his role as the spiritual leader of more than 1 billion people, and as the latest in a long, unbroken line of successors to St. Peter. That alone makes the inauguration a deeply meaningful moment in global religious history. Now, here's something most people don't realize. This ceremony isn't about politics or power, it's about service and spiritual leadership. And every detail of it is packed with symbolism. Let's talk about two of the most important elements. First is the pallium, a white woolen band placed over the Pope's shoulders. It represents his responsibility as a shepherd, guiding the Church and caring for his people. Think of it as a spiritual badge of leadership, but not one of domination, rather one of care and humility. Second is the ring of the Fisherman. It connects directly to St. Peter, who was a fisherman before he became a disciple. The ring is custom, made for each pope, and represents his authority and duty to lead with faith. Historically, it was even used to seal documents, and when a pope dies, the ring is destroyed to mark the end of his reign. These symbols help people feel connected to something greater, something timeless, and that's the real magic of the inauguration. It reaches deep into history while also pointing forward to the future. The inauguration itself usually takes place during a Mass in St. Peter's Square, right in front of the iconic basilica. You've probably seen the huge crowd of cardinals in red, the Swiss Guard in their colorful uniforms, and the world's cameras capturing every second. It's a carefully organized event, but also a spiritual moment that draws together people from all over the world. Now, here's a cool twist. This tradition has evolved. In the past, popes used to be crowned with a triple tiara, a huge jewel-covered crown that symbolized power. But in the 1960s, that was dropped. Why? To reflect a shift from ruling like a monarch to serving like a shepherd. Today's popes emphasize humility and connection over grandeur, and the ceremony reflects that. Even world leaders attend papal inaugurations. Presidents, prime ministers, royalty, you name it, not because the Pope has political power over them, but because they recognize his moral voice in the world. He speaks on peace, poverty, human dignity, and global issues that affect us all. The event becomes more than religious. It's a moment of global diplomacy and mutual respect. And thanks to media, the whole world watches. From live broadcasts on major networks to clips trending on social media, this ancient tradition reaches millions in real time. It bridges generations, cultures, and even belief systems. You don't have to be Catholic to appreciate the historical and cultural weight of the moment. So, in a world that's constantly changing, a papal inauguration is a rare example of deep continuity. It shows us that even as technology evolves and global politics shift, some rituals still carry profound meaning. They connect the present to the past and remind us that leadership can still be rooted in something greater than personal ambition. If you've ever wondered why people travel across the world just to witness it, this is why. It's not just about who the new pope is. It's about what the ceremony stands for: faith, tradition, unity, and hope. Thanks for watching. If you found this breakdown helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more deep dives into global events and traditions. See you in the next video. Welcome back to the show. Today we're exploring something you may have heard about in the news: the inauguration of a new pope. While the headlines often focus on who's in attendance or what political figures showed up, what's often missed is the why. Why does this ancient ceremony still matter in a world that's more digital, fast-paced, and often skeptical of tradition? Let's go back to the roots. The papal inauguration is more than just a ceremonial handover. It's one of the most historically rich and spiritually meaningful events in the world. When a pope is inaugurated, he's stepping into a role that traces back almost to 0 years, to a man named Peter, a fisherman from Galilee, who Christians believe was appointed by Jesus himself to lead the early church. That man became the first bishop of Rome, and every pope since has been considered his successor. That's a long line of spiritual leadership, and it's not symbolic, it's foundational. The ceremony is a public declaration that this man is now the shepherd of over 1 billion Catholics. Not a political ruler, but a moral and spiritual leader, one who speaks to people across countries, cultures, and generations. Now, let's talk about what actually happens in the inauguration. One of the central moments is the Pope receiving two symbols. First, the Pallium, a white woolen band placed over his shoulders. It represents his duty to lead with humility and care, like a shepherd watching over his flock. It's not flashy, but it's deeply meaningful. The second is the ring of the Fisherman, named after St. Peter, who was a fisherman. This ring is custom, made for each pope, and symbolizes his authority. It used to be pressed into wax to seal important documents. And interestingly, when a pope dies, the ring is destroyed to show the end of his authority. A fresh start begins with a new ring, a new man, and a new chapter for the Church. But these symbols aren't just for show. They carry centuries of tradition. They link the present with the past. They say, this is not just another leader. This is a continuation of a sacred mission. Historically, the inauguration looked very different. For centuries, the Pope was crowned with a triple tiara, an ornate, bejeweled crown that reflected both religious and political authority, but that changed in the 1960s. The crown was set aside permanently. Why? Because the Church wanted to emphasize service over sovereignty. In other words, the Pope is not a king. He's a servant. That shift in tone tells us a lot about how the Church sees its place in today's world. Papal inaugurations are also moments of incredible unity. The ceremony brings together cardinals from every continent, along with world leaders, diplomats, and representatives from other religions. It becomes a moment of shared respect, regardless of belief. You have presidents and royalty sitting side by side with monks, nuns, and everyday Catholics. Why? Because the role of the Pope still carries moral influence. He speaks out on war, poverty, climate change, and human dignity. His words can move millions, not with power, but with principle. And of course, in today's media age, millions more are watching from afar. You've got satellite feeds, social media clips, live streams. It's all out there, being broadcast across the globe. What was once an event held behind the walls of Rome is now a shared global experience. People of all faiths, or even no faith, watch and listen because what the Pope represents reaches beyond religious lines. It's about values, stability, and hope. So, when we think about the papal inauguration, we're not just witnessing a ceremony, we're witnessing continuity. We're seeing history alive in the present. It reminds us that in a world where leadership often changes rapidly, there are still institutions that draw their strength from something deeper, from tradition, from service, and from a commitment to something bigger than themselves. That's the true weight of the papal inauguration, not just who the Pope is, but what the moment stands for. It's about the long arc of history, the responsibility of leadership, and the quiet power of ritual to remind us of what matters most. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this segment, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share the episode. We've got more historical deep dives coming up next week. Until then, stay curious. In the heart of Rome, where ancient stones carry the weight of millennia, a quiet transformation begins. A ceremony is set in motion, one not of politics or conquest, but of tradition, continuity, and faith. The papal inauguration, it is one of the most sacred and symbolic rituals in human history, a moment when the spiritual leadership of more than 1 billion Catholics passes from one man to another, but this is not simply a change in leadership. It is the continuation of a legacy that stretches back nearly 2,000 years, to a fisherman named Peter, who walked alongside Christ. As the first bishop of Rome, Peter became the foundation of what would one day be called the papacy, and every pope since has been considered his successor, not in name but in mission. Each new pontiff is seen as the steward of that original calling, to lead not with force, but with faith. Cut to historical paintings and statues of early popes, medieval manuscripts, and images of ancient conclaves, the ceremony itself, though adapted over time, is steeped in deep symbolism. Incense, Peter's Square, under the gaze of Bernini's colonnade and beneath the towering dome of Michelangelo's masterpiece, the new pope receives two ancient symbols of his office. The pallium, a simple band of wool, is placed over his shoulders. It represents his role as shepherd, a leader tasked not with dominion, but with the care of souls. Woven from the wool of lambs blessed on the feast of St. Agnes, it is a reminder of humility, sacrifice, and service. Then comes the ring of the fisherman, a reference to St. Peter's life before his apostleship. Each ring is unique, cast specifically for the new pope, and when his papacy ends, the ring is destroyed, never to be worn again. In this act we see the fragile and temporary nature of human authority, even one so revered. Footage transitions to past inaugurations, the crowd gathered, popes waving, cardinals embracing. For centuries, the inauguration included the crowning of the pope with a jeweled triple tiara, a striking symbol of both spiritual and temporal power. But in 1963, that tradition was set aside. The modern papacy no longer reigns from a throne, but walks with the people. It leads not from above, but from among. It is no longer about spectacle, but about service. Still, the significance remains. Every chant, every blessing, every gesture echoes with history. The Latin words spoken are not relics. They are living threads that connect the present to the past. And in that connection lies the true power of the papal inauguration. Cut to crowds from around the world, pilgrims, priests, world leaders, gathering in anticipation. The ceremony is global. Representatives from across faiths and nations arrive to witness a new chapter in spiritual leadership. Diplomats, monarchs, prime ministers, all drawn not by politics, but by principle. By the voice, the Pope carries on issues that touch all humanity: peace, justice, compassion, and conscience. And thanks to modern media, the world watches together. From living rooms in Lagos to cathedrals in Quebec, the moment is shared across screens and borders. In this way, the inauguration becomes more than a Catholic event. It becomes a human one, a shared reminder that tradition still has a place in a world of constant change. In an age where leadership often comes and goes with noise and haste, the inauguration of a pope stands apart. It is quiet, measured, reverent, and in its silence it speaks volumes. It tells us that some roles are not seized, they are entrusted. That true leadership is not proclaimed, it is lived, and that some traditions, even in the modern age, still have the power to unite, to inspire, and to endure. Final shot, the newly inaugurated Pope offering a silent blessing over the crowd as music swells. Narrator, the world may change, but the moment remains. A new voice rises, and the mission continues. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues and students, today we turn our attention to a subject that combines theology, ritual, and history in a unique and enduring way: the papal inauguration. Far more than a religious formality or a media spectacle, this ceremony encapsulates centuries of tradition, evolving ecclesiastical identity, and the interplay between spiritual authority and historical continuity. The inauguration of a pope is a ritual that affirms the continuity of the Catholic Church's leadership through apostolic succession, a doctrine central to Catholic theology. According to tradition, this succession begins with St. Peter, considered the first bishop of Rome and the original rock, upon which the Church was founded. Every subsequent pope is seen as Peter's spiritual heir. Thus, the inauguration is not merely a public recognition of a new leader. It is a theological statement about the preservation of Christ's commission through an unbroken lineage. Historically, the papacy has developed through various phases, from persecuted bishops in early Christian Rome to powerful medieval pontiffs who wielded immense temporal power. These transformations are reflected in the way papal inaugurations have evolved. In the early Church, there was no fixed ritual for installation. However, by the Middle Ages, the coronation of the Pope with the papal tiara became standard practice. This triple crown symbolized the Pope's spiritual authority, temporal jurisdiction, and doctrinal primacy. Yet this tradition underwent a profound change in the 20th century. With the inauguration of Pope Paul VI in 1963, the papal coronation was replaced by a simpler, humbler ceremony focused on spiritual service rather than temporal rule. This marked a significant theological and pastoral shift, especially in the post-Vatican Roman II era. The emphasis moved from monarchy to servant leadership, mirroring broader movements within the Church toward collegiality and global inclusivity. Two particular elements of the modern inauguration merit close attention. The first is the pallium, a circular woolen vestment placed on the Pope's shoulders. Derived from the dress of Roman officials, it now signifies pastoral responsibility and unity with the bishops. It ties the Pope not only to his patrine roots, but also to the global episcopacy, underlining his role as primus inter pares, first among equals. The second symbol is the ring of the Fisherman, which bears an image of St. Peter casting his net. Traditionally used to seal documents, the ring today functions as a sign of papal authority and personal commitment to the mission of the Church. It is destroyed upon a pope's death or abdication, marking the end of his service and reinforcing the non-possessive, temporary nature of his role. The ceremony itself takes place in St. Peter's Square, often before hundreds of thousands of the faithful and millions more via global broadcast. This global attention serves a dual function. It reaffirms the universal scope of the Church, while also inviting the wider world into a moment of deeply rooted Christian identity. Moreover, papal inaugurations have become important ecumenical and diplomatic moments. Representatives of other Christian denominations, world religions, and foreign states attend, not merely as guests, but as symbolic witnesses to the moral and cultural influence of the papacy beyond Catholicism. This underscores the dual nature of the event. It is both deeply internal and broadly international. In a contemporary context, the papal inauguration also serves as a bridge between tradition and modernity. While steeped in ritual, Latin prayers, Gregorian chant, and vestments with centuries of precedent, it is also a moment of renewal. Each pope brings a new theological emphasis, a different pastoral style, and a personal vision for the Church. The inauguration signals the beginning of that journey, rooted in tradition but oriented toward the future. Importantly, from an academic perspective, papal inaugurations provide a rich site for interdisciplinary analysis. Theologians, historians, political scientists, and sociologists can all find meaning in this rite. Whether one approaches it as a theological sacrament, a socio-political performance, or a symbol of cultural resilience. The inauguration embodies the complex role that religion still plays in global society. To conclude, the historical significance of papal inaugurations lies not just in the ritual itself, but in what it represents. It is a proclamation of continuity, a reaffirmation of authority through service, and a moment of global witness to the endurance of faith-based leadership. In a world that often prizes immediacy and disruption, the papal inauguration stands as a powerful counter-example, a ceremony that reminds us that some institutions persist not through power, but through principled tradition. Thank you.